Hello again. Just wanted to throw together a quick video today on Philly cheesesteaks, how to make them, and what I think is probably the best method for making them by yourself at home. There's a couple of videos available online with regards to, buying a steak and then using a really sharp knife and slicing really thin slices of meat and then cooking that. I'm sure it could work, but there's definitely a much easier method. I've been doing this for maybe the past couple of years. Not very frequently because it's super duper unhealthy, but I think the results are great, and it takes, 5 minutes. I'm also going to do this video by myself. It's going to be, me cooking with one hand and recording with the other, so you'll know it's not actually that hard. Yeah, check it out. Ingredients right here. So this is sort of the one and only trick involved in this recipe. Usually Philly cheesesteak uses actual steak meat, so you'll want ribeye or, strip loin, something like that. This is a package of frozen beef ribeye shabu shabu. So this is like Asian style hot pot meat, but the actual cut, if you take a look at the actual cuts of meat, like right there, that's the spinalis. If I were to unfurl that, that would just be a ribeye steak. And this is shaved incredibly thin, and you can get this in, your local Asian grocer in the frozen section. It's usually used for hot pot, but I figured that it actually works amazingly for making Philly cheesesteaks as well. And it saves you a bunch of effort from actually having to shave meat yourself. Other than that, we have, this is, just buns. Typically you want to use some nice hoagie buns for these. However, we couldn't find any at the grocery store, and this is probably the best we could do. Not amazing, they're a little bit too dense, but I think they'll be fine. A bunch of onions. For the purists out there, you might not want onions. I sort of like them. You can use any sort of onion you want. We use sweet onions here, so we're going to cook these a little bit less than you would normally and retain some of that crunch, and they still won't be that pungent. You can use red onions, white onions, whatever you want. Cheez Whiz, absolute necessity. It's probably mostly plastic or something, but it's sort of necessary for the recipe if you want it to be authentic. I personally like banana peppers, sort of like include if you want, or just leave it out if you want. And we have a little bit of freshly ground black pepper. Tiny bit of salt in here because the Cheez Whiz is very salty. So, let's go. First thing I'm gonna do, toss these buns into the oven briefly to just, not really toast, but to keep them warm. They'll be a little bit softer afterwards too. I have it at 170. And we are going to lightly saute the onions. Like I said, probably medium-high-ish heat. Don't burn. I use, what is this? Avocado oil. You can use canola in neutral cooking oil. Probably, tablespoon and a half of oil? I'm using half a cup of onions here, and then just saute. So it's been around 45 seconds. You probably don't want your onions to get too golden brown or too soft, although it is up to your own preference. I like my onions with a bit more texture and a bit more crunch, but I also have the luxury of doing that because, with sweet onions, they're naturally a bit less pungent. Normally you want to cook that off a little bit. Okay, so while the onions are cooking, I'm going to microwave the Cheez Whiz. This is an important step in the process. This is probably, we're making 2 sandwiches, half a cup or so of Cheez Whiz. Very salty, really greasy, really not that good for you. But toss it in the microwave. Probably you want to do it for around 40 seconds or so, and then do stir it in the middle. Otherwise, the edges will burn and the middle of it will not actually be heated. So by this point, our onions are probably done. Looks pretty good to me. Probably a little bit more on the brown side than I normally would have preferred, but still a little bit crunchy. So I'll take that off the heat now, and we will get on to the actual meat. 40 seconds later, you can see that this is post-stirring. It's mostly melted, not entirely, so probably another 20 seconds or so, and you should be okay. And you want to keep this warm-ish, so it's liquid while you serve it. Okay, so I'm going to crank up the heat a little bit, or actually a lot. We want the pan to get really hot, toss some oil in it, and then we are going to fry up our meat. So I took the time to take the plastic off the meat. There's the dog, somehow sensed it. Have one of these. I think normally you want to defrost these more or less. They do release a little bit more water once they're frozen, but they'll cook up fine regardless. So you want your oil just about smoking, and then I'll probably do this in maybe 2.5 batches. You don't want too much oil in the pan because these are quite well marbled. They'll give off a lot of fat, but let's cook these down. So now this is mostly a matter of personal preference, the level of doneness you want to get this to. The meat is really thin and it's steak, so it's really, really tender. So you don't really need to cook it that much. However, if you do want to brown it and get a nice sear and get some of that caramelized flavor, you're going to trade that off for slightly tougher meat. So I'm going to go for somewhere in the middle, maybe a little bit browned, just like that, but otherwise really tender, and I'll take it off and set it aside for now. Cooks really, really fast, even from frozen. Okay, so I've gone and turned off the heat. The meat is just done. That took in total probably, I don't know, 1.5 minutes. It was really, really fast just because of how thin these slices of meat are. So all that's left now is to put that meat into that bowl, and then we will build the sandwiches. Okay, so took these out of the oven a tiny little bit ago. Preheat at 170. Outside's nice and toasty. The inside is nice and warm, and we'll just assemble the sandwiches. I did one like a second ago, but I did it in the wrong order. But you want to use roughly, I don't know, 200 grams of meat per person. Probably make a couple more, or one more sandwich for us because our bread is so small, but if you get normal size hoagie buns, that should be enough. And the only thing there's to do now is to add your beef and then spoon just more Cheez Whiz than you probably actually want to eat, but just trust me on this. So meat, Cheez Whiz, maybe add some onions in there as well, and then another layer of meat. Some banana peppers if you like it spicy, and then more Cheez Whiz. And I don't know if I have any international viewers, but Cheez Whiz is processed American cheese, sort of like Kraft singles, but then in semi-liquid form. And this provides essentially all of the flavor and the sauce of the sandwich. If you want a couple more slices of meat on top, and a bit more Cheez Whiz. All right, Philly cheesesteak. Bread's a little bit small, but I guarantee you this is going to be delicious. Press that down a little bit. All right. I'll just put it open, and then I want you to try it. So, after so cross section, you can tell that this is actually a Philly cheesesteak. It's unbelievably good. It's not something you want to eat like every day, or even every week, or even every month, but it's delicious. The sauce coats like every little bit of the super thin meat. The dog is waiting for some. The onions are perfect if you like them. The peppers add a little bit of bite. Otherwise, it's really, really cloying because of how rich the Cheez Whiz and the beef is, but 5 minutes, super easy, pretty cheap. Okay, so hopefully you like the recipe. Please do try it out. If you do, let me know how it goes. Maybe there was something that can be improved. Otherwise, looking forward to making the next video. Dog's really impatient. Yeah, if you really liked it, give a comment, subscribe, like, whatever you want. Till next time. See you then. Oh.